joined investment banking in 91, Harshad Mehta came on the scene.
Harshad Shantilal Mehta.
Big move.
In India, we see that fintech companies are burning money for 5-10 years.
Yeah.
In India, we tend to support and glorify founders too much.
Exactly.
I think that should disappear.
Customer want us to understand them rather than we understanding our process and system. Actually, and that is where we have to align our thought process.
Gen Z's is the next powerhouse. They're going to do some crazy amount of stuff. There is a very famous Rajnikant dialogue. It's in Tamil, which I always tell my team and my friends and all. Kashtapadame edum kadikadu.
கஷ்டப்படாம கிடைக்கிறது
Innikum nilikadu. What it means is,
Okay, welcome everyone to the next episode of Impactables with Rishav. Today we have Mr. Sunil Mehta sir with us, a banking veteran. Like I would say, when we were not born, he has seen the entire thing in the banking industry. Welcome sir, welcome to the episode.
Thank you for having me.
Okay, so I will start with this. Like I saw that you recently retired. Actually, how the retirement feels like?
Well, retirement is two-pronged. One, you miss the hustle bustle of going to office every day, working with your colleagues, and doing things that keep you busy. So by the time you come home, you're tired, you have dinner, and you go to sleep. On the other hand, what you do miss out is spending free time, and most importantly in today's world, the mental health. In retirement, that is one of the biggest things I've seen change in me, at least, is these stress levels have gone down drastically in that sense. And so I am more light. I may have put on some weight, but I feel more lighter, less stressed. My anxiety levels have gone down drastically in that sense. I used to have very bad acidity. That has now gone because of the stress levels that has gone down. You do miss, I won't say it's a heaven, but you do miss the meeting of your clients, you're doing business. But that's why I keep doing something or the other. Either it is teaching, consulting, training, doing some project which keeps you engaged in that same field. So that way you don't feel that, oh, I am totally cut off with what I did for 30 years. So that way I am trying to bring a balance on the other side. Earlier it was work and less family. Now it's more family and less work. But you still feel involved in the day-to-day jobs, working with people like you. It gives me a new learning. Okay, what is happening in the world today, and this is one area that I had never worked on. So this is something that is very interesting to me, to speak on podcasts, to meet people like you. I am also involved with a few startups, so that also keeps me busy. So I think all in all, God has been kind.
Okay, so like I put it this way, like you have seen everything. When I say everything, when I was born, actually, at least after some moment of time, mobile came into the picture. But when you started working, there was nothing. I think hardly computers were there. That also, that box wala computer. So, what changed, like within yourself or in the industry or as a whole, when you think that from 1990 to this 2025, how do you feel this change?
Well, as I was telling you earlier, we are the baby boomer generation of India. US 1945 to 1965 were considered as baby boomers. In India, that baby boomer generation is the people who were born 65 to 85. And just like US, in India, our generation has seen a huge plethora of changes. I'll give you 2-3 examples from both business and personal life also. When I completed my MBA and joined Bajaj Electricals as a management trainee. So 6 months we had a ball of a time. And in 6 months' time, I applied to Can Bank Financial in investment banking. Would you believe that I made my application by hand? I actually saw my application once I had joined them. I saw my application. It was a handwritten application and it was going like this. because it was a plain paper, so it was not straight line. Because there were no computers in 1990, typewriters were very rare. I couldn't get my hand on a typewriter, so we wrote a physical handwriting. Even when I joined in investment banking, we used to prepare all the offer documents on the typewriter. We had a typist, by the way, who's still a friend of mine. He used to type it. Then he used to give us a printout. We used to correct it. He used to put ink on it, type again on that. Then that document used to go to the printing press. We have seen that offsetting type wala printers. So they used to actually put every word. You know, if you've seen in old movies, you've seen they put the words and then they print. We have seen offer documents being printed like that. Those were the days of controller of capital issues. There was no SEBI at that time. So we have seen those.
This was the year?
1990. Like SEBI came in 1992.
Okay.
So for 2 years, there was, 2 years before that, till tak you had a controller of capital issues, no SEBI, we used to deal with them. And from there till today, it's a world of change in terms of investment banking alone. Then 96, when I joined HDFC Bank, one of the things that attracted me was they told me you will have an email. And at that time, email छोड़ो computer नहीं था घर पे. So I said, it will be my personal email. I remember that question because you never seen email at those days. Yeah. The entire banks, the memory used to be 2 MB. So you couldn't have mails, big mails sent to too many people because it would clog the memory server of the bank. It was 96, it was like that. Yeah. Again, from those days to today. And then when I migrated to transaction banking in HDFC Bank, we have seen physical checks, we have seen everything physical. And then 2005 onwards, when RTGS came in, actually that was the real innovation that was there, because it moved from physical to digital. From physical checks to digitally it went. We have seen, and today what we are seeing in digital. On personal front, if you know, telephone lines were hardlined. So we used to stay at Goregaon, a suburb in Bombay. They had the world's largest waiting list, 25 years. You had to wait to get a telephone line.
25 years?
Yes. Kandivali phone exchange was the exchange. It had a largest waiting list. So you had to pay black money to get the phone. And today you
and how much it reduced after paying money?
5,000 rupees you had to pay.
In 25 years, the duration of getting a line? Immediately?
No, then you would get immediately. So I guess nobody waited for 25 years. Everybody paid money and got the phone line. From those days till today, we have seen. So we have seen, and this is personal, but if you see even on a country level, 1990, we faced the entire crisis to today where we are in the stature of our country in the world is amazing change. So that's why we really feel very blessed that our generation was able to see these changes, and maybe that's why our generation is also very conservative
and
patient, because things couldn't move faster at that time, so you had to be patient, and that's why maybe things have done well for us. We were never in a hurry कि नहीं 30 हो गया, I have to buy a house. बस जब होगा तब खरीदेंगे. There was no deadline like that for us. We actually bought a car only after 2000 or so. I got my first company car. So our generation has seen it all. So we are conservative on that sense. And we are also, very ambitious in that front. I remember a discussion, Mr. Aditya Puri was sitting, Mr. Shri Krishnan, who is the MD of Karnataka Bank now, and we were sitting with him. And Mr. Puri was saying, यार अपन साले सबके सब मिडिल क्लास लोग हैं, अपन को कभी भी है ना ये जमता ही नहीं है 1 करोड़ 2 करोड़ की बात. And he was the MD, he was Citibank का MD, and then but the mindset was very middle class. So therefore, the bank also grew at that time, was very conservative, never took undue risks. So I think that our generation had the best of both the worlds. We have seen the old world, so we have a lot of respect for our elders, for our education, for our country. And also we are very ambitious in that sense that we have been able to participate in what is changing in the country. So in that sense, I think our generation has been very fortunate.
So in this duration also, like there was a market crisis also happened by the time when you joined.
Yeah.
When you started your career. So did it impacted you as an individual or your career or anything change?
Yeah. So what happened is, when I joined investment banking in 91, we were in the thick of stock markets. So in a year's time, Harshad Mehta came on the scene, and we used to hear every day some or the other stock. "Hey, आज हर्षद भाई ने ये खरीदा है, आज हर्षद भाई ने वो खरीदा है." Now with a 3,000 rupee salary, there wasn't much you could do at that time. So all you did is be happy that you are in the entire whole thing of stock market, but never participated because we never had any money to invest also, and mutual funds were not there. So mutual funds is another innovation which wasn't there when we started. It came only in 2000. So we never participated in the stock market, but it did affect the investment banking field, is because after 92, 94 till 2003, this 9-10 year period was really bad for both the stock market, primary, secondary, and the investment banking field. It was really bad. I mean, if you've seen the charts of Nifty, from 93 to 2003, the 10-year period gave you zero return.
Okay.
That's the only 10-year period where Nifty has given 0% return.
For entire 10 years?
Entire 10 years. I mean, it went up, it went down, but point to point is
0% net.
Because was Harshad Mehta happened, then Ketan Parekh happened, then that MS Shoes happened. So a lot of these things happened, and that time the country was also going through difficult times. Then the dot-com boom happened in 2000. So एक के बाद एक something or the other kept happening here, and therefore the market never got stabilized at that point of time. And after 2003, if you remember, Nifty was 5,000. So to tell you, in those 10 years, Nifty went from 1,000 to 5,000. But in terms of returns, it was very, but 2003 was 5,000 to 24,000 today is an amazing journey
in
that
22
India
years.
has seen. So yeah, once I was in Kotak in 2003, again, we were in the thick of the markets, and we were participating in it. We could see what's happening because Kotak is stock market driven, investment banking, broking. So a lot of the information used to flow through you like that. And therefore, we've seen it all actually, quite a lot of it. I mean, just for reference, the Sensex was 1,000 in 1990.
Okay.
It touched 1,000 for the first time in 100 years or whatever time in 1990. So we consider ourselves very fortunate that we passed out and it touched 1,000. Now it's 80,000. Yeah.
So interesting. So like all your years, like most of the focus was cash management, treasury, transaction banking. But obviously in the early days of banking, when the new bank came, like the private banks and the PSU banks, the transaction banking word was not that famous. But what do you feel, why it was need for the banks and how it impacted the banks first?
Yeah.
Startups impact, I have seen. How it impacted the bank in terms of their balance sheet or their cash management, all those things.
So you will need to go slightly back in history. In India, cash management was started by Citibank.
Okay.
Now, Citibank had only 8 branches at that time. It didn't have a network and everything was physical in early 80s. So they tied up with Corporation Bank. Corporation Bank was like Citibank. So the entire system of CMS, processes, everything in Corporation Bank was actually set up by Citibank. And Corporation Bank used to do everything that Citibank used to tell them. So they were doing pretty phenomenally well. Corporation Bank, that's why was a pioneer at that time, because they learned a lot from Citibank. Globally, Citibank and other banks have been doing cash management for years. But in India, it was Citibank which started with Corporation Bank. But the disadvantage they had was they had to depend on a correspondent bank. They didn't have their own branch networks. On the other hand, you had public sector banks which had the branch network, the clients, the assets, but they didn't have the technology, the product and the people. So when HDFC Bank was set up, Mr. Puri's aim was, I want to combine the good of both these. To sit foreign banks ka technology, people and products and processes, and distribution network of the public sector banks.
And Mr. Puri was heading which bank?
HDFC Bank.
HDFC Bank.
Yeah. So he was the starting MD from 96 till 22 when he retired finally. He is the longest serving MD of any bank in the world.
Okay.
Later on, I think somebody else has become, but he was the oldest, longest running bank. So HDFC then decided, now Mr. Puri being ex-Citibank, HDFC Bank started with the aim of doing transaction banking, cash management.
And this was which year?
96, see 94 license got, 95 1st Jan, HDFC Bank started as a bank. So in the initial year, they were doing corporate lending. They had a book of 250 customers that they will lend to. They didn't lend to 250 first customer. They had a list of customers that they would lend to. That continued for 1.5 to 2 years. Then the time came to start other businesses. So the first business that was started was transaction banking. So 97, 96, 97, the systems were bought, set up, processes were set up. 97 onwards, the cash management was started in HDFC Bank. And that's why they are still the pioneers in this. The reason for me to tell you this story is HDFC Bank from day one always believed that they will do working capital and transaction banking, period. Whereas most of the other banks in India, both private as well as public sector banks, were running behind assets. Assets कहाँ से आएगा? Large corporates, large PSU organizations को lending करके, projects finance करके, they would get large assets and they would do this. But HDFC Bank understood the importance of transaction banking because they were doing only working capital. So here let me tell you the difference in banking in India and the US especially. In the US today and even 30 years back, most of their income is made from retail banking.
Okay.
Why? Where does the wholesale go, which is the corporates? So most of the corporates are asked to borrow from the market, money market. So what do? They issue bonds, the market subscribes to it and they raise their money. So what do the banks do? The banks largely do retail. But obviously retail is a very granular business, very difficult to scale up. So what they were also allowed to do is investment banking, broking, trading, prop trading, a lot of these things. So you have different banks which became successful based on certain specific niche. So Deutsche Bank, for example, Deutsche Bank was largely a trading bank. It was largely a money market bank. So they would do everything. I'm not saying they didn't do retail, they didn't do wholesale. They do everything. But where is their large focus? For Deutsche Bank, it was money markets, trading. They made their money. JP Morgan, investment banking, trading. Bank of America is a pure commercial bank as we call it.
These banks are known for their specialization actually.
Specialization bolo, or they came later on.
Okay.
See, the initial banks in USA, JP Morgan was a bank in the sense of lending, not anything else. But as it became bigger, all these businesses started making more and more money for them. And the traditional business of banking made less money. Amongst all of these banks, one bank which has stood out in US is Wells Fargo. Wells Fargo does only working capital and transaction banking. It doesn't do very small investment banking, very small money market trading, broking, but they focus on this. Second, they do business only in the US. In every other country in the world, they do only correspondent banking.
Okay.
They have no branches anywhere else. They will not do anything else. HDFC Bank is built on a similar model as Wells Fargo. So in India, transaction banking as a business, as a product started Citi, but it was actually made money by the HDFC Bank. So why is it so important? Why is transaction banking, especially cash management, so important for a bank? Normally, a bank has two sides: lending, which is assets. I am giving money to you, and deposits,
Correct.
called liabilities. I take deposits from the public. Now, I may take deposits from the public and I can give money to either corporates or to retail. But I want to do what? I want to reduce my deposit cost and I want to increase my revenue that I make from assets.
Okay.
Increasing revenue from assets is slightly difficult. So what I would want to do is reduce the cost of my deposits. Now, mostly you've seen CASA is called. So 100 rupees total deposits. Normally 60 rupees is fixed deposit. 40 rupees is current account, savings account, as it's called CASA. Now this ratio could be 35, 38, 42, but mota it is 60-40. Out of this 40%, how much is current and how much is savings actually decided your cost of funds.
Okay.
Because 40% to काफी बैंकों का हो गया, but it was largely savings.
But what is the best ratio?
No, there is no called best ratio.
Okay.
The point is what we can only see is what the best bank has done it. So HDFC Bank was the best in terms of current account before the merger happened. So whatever I say about HDFC is still 22 because after that they have had a lot of issues because of the merger, which they are still coming out, but till 22. So out of your 40% CASA, the 10 to 12% was current account, 28% was savings account. For most of the other banks, it was 5, 6, 7%.
Okay.
So where did it get all of those current account? And that is where cash management comes in. Now, if you go to a client and say, sir, mujhe current account de do, to wo dega nahi. So what you have to do, what HDFC did is, they said, boss, I have to give solutions, I have to give product to the corporates so that they do business through me. I get their flows, and when I get their flows, some amount remains in the current account. And that is the basic purpose of cash management. To ensure that the flows of my corporate client goes through me so that I get current account float in that. And that they have been very successful. And the primary reason for that is their very good cash management business. Now, corporates is only one part of it. The other business that they focused on was the capital market segment. So in capital market, they captured the brokers. So, even till today, the brokers go get money from the stock exchange and the customers' accounts are credited. So there was a one-day float. HDFC Bank at one point of time used to do 90% of the clearing. In fact, RBI and SEBI came and said, boss, this cannot be, because if one day HDFC is closed, the entire stock markets will close, because HDFC did 90% of the settlement.
For the entire stock market?
90%. So intentionally RBI asked other banks, so ICICI, Axis Bank.
Because they didn't want that monopoly to be created.
Yeah. No, one is monopoly as a business, but the other was systemic risk. If tomorrow HDFC is closed, 90% of the settlements won't happen because the customers' accounts were there, brokers' accounts were there, the money was lying with there. So, all of these products, then there was your FIs, financial institutions. A lot of these wholesale segments give you current account, but all of them require solution, and that is where the cash management business comes in, transaction banking comes in, because they provide all those solutions to them, and therefore the clients deal with you, and therefore you get current account. Now, this is one part of the business of earning money. There is another credit aspect to it. Now, a lot of the banks lend money to corporates. Now, what happens? You give a check, वो check लिया, वो अपना काम कर रहा है, while you have a lot of these conditions like end use, you will not do this, you will pay only your vendors and all of that. But there is no monitoring on that. If you are doing their cash management, if you are looking at their flows, I don't even need any report from you. I can just pick out my monthly report and see how much is your volume going through me. And that gives me an idea as to first, how are you doing? You can always tell me I have grown 20%, but your volumes are not growing here. So cash management is also a quasi credit control kind of a thing. The RM, corporate banking RM, can actually learn from the cash management as to how the client is doing. So these are the aspects why cash management is so important and why a lot of the foreign banks focus on it. It gives you granular income. See, most of the assets that you lend to, especially on the wholesale side, is very lumpy. I gave 1,000 crore loan, I'll get interest. Wo 1,000 crore loan goes bad, my 1,000 crore goes bad. Whereas in cash management, first of all, you're not lending money at all. So it is pure income for you. Secondly, it is granular. Even if my one client goes away, it's not even 2% of my business, 3% of my business. So it's granular. Granular in the sense small. So we used to call it chindi chor. कि ना एक पैसा हम लेते हैं customer से, but that's what creates the ocean in that. So it's a very granular, very consistent business. It is irrespective seasonality, business environment, everything. It continues. It is like a ocean which lies under the volcano, which nobody understands because it is flowing peacefully, quietly into the bank, going out, and that is a lifeline for corporates. Corporates want excuse me, one process where they can make payments and collect their money very quickly, easily, and full recon. So today, cash management business does all of that for the clients. All of the banks which understood that have made good money, have made good businesses out of this. Now, why is this not so prevalent in all the banks in India? So, for example, what is prevalent is retail assets.
Retail assets.
Everybody wants to do retail assets.
Correct.
Why?
And we
because
also
you
know
understand.
that.
Because you understand that business. Transaction banking is a business which the top leader of the bank has to understand. Because, the biggest challenge in this business is that the income is not seen in cash management. Why? The cash management income that comes, thoda fees aata hai, but which is a small part of it. The largest part is your float income. Now, what is float? Float is the current account that you bring to the bank. So suppose if I bring 1,000 crore current account float in the bank. Now what is the income from this? There is no income, direct income from this. What it does is, the bank doesn't have to borrow 1,000 crores
from someone else.
The cost for which will be 6%.
Correct.
Because today 10-year G-Sec is 636, overnight call rates may be 5.5, but I'll have to borrow that money. So the opportunity cost is 5.5%. So what does the business unit get? The business unit gets actually a transfer pricing from the treasury. That you got 1,000 crores, I'm giving you 6% on that. Chalo, 60 crores is your income. So it is not a direct visible income. It is a float, which people don't realize that, and I mean in the olden days, one of the biggest source of float was the DD, demand draft. What happens when you issue a demand draft? I go to a bank and ask a demand draft for 1 lakh rupees. The bank debits my account and gives me a demand draft. And that money is put into a pool account. Now, when that DD comes for clearing, then only that 1 lakh goes from my bank.
Or it is kept in the
Otherwise,
bank.
it is there in the bank.
And I will unfloat from then.
And that's a float and that's a pool account. And that money lies in the bank. Now, most of the PSU banks and a lot of the private sector banks never considered this as the float. Similarly, your clearing, check clearing. Today, you deposit a check in the clearing. Tomorrow, you get money from RBI. You give credit to the customer day after tomorrow. So, the bank has money float one day, but this is in a pool account. It's not in a client account. It's in a pool account. Now, that pool money is also float, and that has come because the cash management team has got clients who got you checks, but this is also not visible because this is also float. So a lot of banks didn't give credit for these floats to the business teams, and that is why the focus on the was not there. तुम करते क्या हो, तुम्हारा income क्या है यहाँ पे? So it's only HDFC Bank and then later ICICI Bank and then Axis Bank. A lot of these banks started realizing it. That boss, ye bhi float hai. At one point of time, HDFC's clearing, the check clearing balances used to be 7 to 8,000 crores. So as I was saying, the identification of the float is extremely difficult, and therefore a lot of banks don't see any income coming out of it. They say, hey boss, it's too costly, there is no income from this. Few banks recognize it, understand it, and therefore they are very successful. A lot of the other banks are not successful. The other reason is this thing called branch banking. Now what happens is, cash management is a business which is run centrally. It is not through a branch. So for example, in the good old days when check used to be there, I would have a client from Bangalore, Delhi, Bombay, but he would have check deposits across the country. So there people would come and deposit checks across the country, or even cash, they would deposit across the country, part of it. So there is a branch, local branch, who's processing the check, who's processing the cash, keeping it, storing it, all that. But the income doesn't go to them.
Okay.
See, normally in a local branch में अगर customer है तो वो float और वो fees उसको मिलेगा. But in cash management, the float and fees used to go to the central team, not to the branch guy. The branch guy gets only the processing cost. He has processed 100 checks, each cost 1 rupee, 100 rupee cost. He'll say 20 out of this is for cash management. So please debit my cost code only for 80, which is fine. And therefore, a lot of the branches are not willing to do business for cash management. This was especially true for the public sector banks, because they said, but why should I work, and there is no income, direct income ascribed to it, and there was nobody sitting in the central office who would force down, no, this, you may not get it, but it is important for the bank. So we need to do this business. Nobody was there. So therefore, other than SBI, most of the other banks have almost zero cash management. In the private sector banks also, like Axis follows a branch model. Everything is in the branch, corporate banking, retail banking, the branch manager does the business. So even they are slightly behind, but now they have caught up in the last 10 years, but they were behind. So it's largely HDFC and ICICI who have, understood the importance of this business, and they have been very successful in getting market share. Especially after 2008, when the foreign banks have fallen apart, they had capital problems, they are closing down in India. Most of the competition in transaction banking from the foreign banks is hardly visible. So therefore, today in cash management business, it's largely HDFC and ICICI, and then there are other small...
How if we see the market split, the bank wise, what's the market share of these particular banks around?
See, the problem is there is nothing called a market share. I'll give you an example. A client, Reliance Industry, receives RTGS from its dealers. It sells goods, the dealers pay him money. Now they can just send directly into the Reliance account an RTGS, which is not cash management, or they can send it through virtual account, which is a cash management product. So the entire top line of the entire India's corporate world can be as you call it in startup world, TAM, a total acceptable market, because that's what can be done through cash management. Then you have credit card, for example. So credit card, every month you make your payment. Either I can make my payment directly into the account number that is given to me, or I can send it to a virtual account of a credit card, which is again cash management. So there is no fixed thing that this can be done only through cash management. It can be done in a normal current account also. But why do corporates take cash management? Is because they want reconciliation. That's the most important reason for taking cash management. Otherwise, to get my collections and to make the payments, I don't need cash management. But what it does is it streamlines my payments, it streamlines my collections, it gives me reconciliation, it gives me technology integrations. Today, Reliance or any of the large companies don't even touch their payments. Their SAP code, so all the employee does it generates today's payment file. They say, yes, I have to make these payments. There are 2 authorizers who would approve it. The file will go directly through an API call to a bank. The bank will automatically debit the customer account and make payments outside. This is through and through a digital payment. I mean, in retail side, we still talk of UPI, so and so. In the corporate side, more than 95% of collections and payments is digital 8 years back. I mean, if you go and ask today a physical checkbook to a large corporates, they wouldn't have one. Neither would they have, कि नहीं sir, मैं तो website पे जाके payment file upload करता हूँ. Nothing like that. It's total digital. So, the corporate world and the wholesale banking world has moved digitally very long back. And obviously, because there are only so many companies, 8,000, 9,000 companies that you had to train, and they have all taken up. In fact, the interesting thing is that the retail digital payments actually started with the corporate. So 2005, when RTGS was launched, we had a tough time convincing banks, convincing the corporates to move digitally, because in those days we used to unfloat on the check. So what each bank was trying to do is trying to replace the cost of one day's loss of float through RTGS charges.
Okay.
So there was funny charges.
So that time charges were there on RTGS?
Matlab, it was there but nobody paid because nobody used RTGS.
अच्छा उस समय कोई यूज ही नहीं किया
करते थे. So 300 rupees, 500 rupees per transaction, because that was my loss.
And 300 rupees, 500 rupees on how much of transaction?
One transaction.
Be it 100 rupees?
No. So it was कि इतना होगा तो इतना. But see, all that was theory. It was all theoretical. So just to take you one step back, in the good old days, there used to be something called a banker's check. Now, when two banks are dealing with each other, they issue a banker's check. So I have borrowed 1,000 crores from you. You will.
ये बैंक रिसिट भी होता था ना, BR बोलते हैं.
नहीं, वो अलग है, वो सिक्योरिटीज में.
ठीक है.
तो banker's check is what? One bank to another bank. I borrowed 1,000 crores from you. You give me a check for 1,000 crores. And that is why most of the banks' clearing houses were in one central place. So in Bombay, it is near VT, Kalba Devi. In Delhi, it was near, I don't know which place is it, but yeah, there are Bangalore. Every city had all banks' clearing houses close to basically the RBI.
Achha, okay.
Why? Because you give me a check for 1,000 crores. I have to ensure that I bank that check with RBI before a cut-off time. So there were people, runners, who were carrying a 1,000 crore check and running to RBI. So RBI felt that, boss, this is too much of a systemic risk. Even if one check bounces or some gets lost, or somebody falls, accident ho gaya, kuch ho gaya uska, wo 1,000 crore nahi pahunchega. Now, you have said that I have lent money, I don't have. So at the end of the day, you will be excess 1,000 crores, I will be short 1,000 crores. Because I would have used that money. I wouldn't keep it idle. I would have used it. So that way, there would be a big systemic risk. So RBI, actually, Mr. Gandhi was the pioneer for this in RBI. They started RTGS actually to replace the banker's check. They didn't want this risk. So they started RTGS, and that's why you see, you have a 2 lakh rupee minimum on RTGS. Because it was actually supposed to be for large value checks only. But then people found that, boss, I can do RBI, I can do normal corporate also. So we went and asked him. So he said, boss, mere ko kuch nahi hai. The system is there. You guys use it. No problem. So everybody started. Now banks was promoting RTGS, actually promoting very reluctantly, because we were losing float income. So I mean, after that 5, 6, 7, 3 years, It took us to actually evangelize it, to make it popular. But then 2008, 2009 onwards, customers, corporates started using it wholeheartedly. Now, what happens is, who's using that money? The employees of the corporate, the finance guy, the finance CFO. So they started getting a hang of digital payments. Arey, RTGS aisa hota hai. So then when the bank started launching it for retail customers, these guys were one of the first guys who started using it because they were very comfortable with doing an RTGS. So जब वो app पे आया तो yeah, they were okay with using it. The retail people took some time to get used to it. So, the corporate payments also evangelize digital payments because the people are getting used to it. And that is why today 95-97% of the collections, payments is digital on the wholesale banking side.
Now this brings to the point like when we say the cash management, everything, there's one common link to it is like we need to have an escrow account also. So obviously many people now understand about the escrow account, but when we see as a market, which bank supports the best system to open an escrow account, and any numbers are there like this bank is leading in the escrow accounts and the process?
See, there is no such one thing because escrow is also one important product this is what I mentioned, that when cash management started, it started with very standardized products. As it grew, a lot of the other use cases started coming in. Escrow is one classic example of that. So where does it come from? Why do I need an escrow account? It came from NBFCs largely for us,
Correct.
for the banking segment. NBFC wants to lend money to a corporate, but it wants to control also
the
that.
money.
So what it will do, it will say, okay, let us jointly open an escrow account in a bank. I will control it. You will upload a file, but I will approve it to know that you are using it for the right purpose. And therefore, the need for escrow came. Then when RERA came in, they made it compulsory to have a escrow account, and the use cases started happening. So again, who are the largest players in this business are the same people who are the largest players in cash management. So your HDFCs, ICICI are very big in that sense. Then Axis is there. A lot of the other banks have come
But
in.
mostly private banks are leading this.
Yeah. It is. See, again, the same point happens that the NBFC could be a client of Bombay, but the account may be opened in Delhi because his customer is in Delhi. So the Delhi branch will get the float.
Okay.
Now, if they don't have a transfer facility, the Bombay wala guy will say, sir, ye mera client hai, mujhe float milna chahiye. But the Delhi guy will say, no, this is my branch. So this is never solved in public sector banks.
Okay.
And in private sector banks, it is solved in the sense of, either the Bombay guy gets
Why this is not getting solved?
Again, as I mentioned, the biggest success of transaction banking lies in the banks where they understand transaction banking.
Okay.
The bosses understand transaction banking. Because then he understands the fights that happen, he understands the credits that need to be given, he understands the float, all of that flows from there. If you try to explain this from the bottom to the top, it's very difficult.
From top to bottom, it is more easier.
Is easier. And that's what I'm saying. If it is known to the top bosses, it flows down easily, but it doesn't flow easily from bottom to up here. And therefore, you will find very few banks who are very public sector banks who are successful in this business. In spite of they having the largest clients, the largest branch network, I mean, they should have been the pioneers in this, but it's not like that.
But again, this is not that much relevant, but why all the kind of things which happens in the market, which we call as scam, happens with only PSU banks?
I don't think I can comment on that because it's not necessary that it's only PSU banks, because there are a lot of other reasons, why you would give loan to a company that you normally wouldn't give with your open eyes. So let's keep it at that.
So, okay. So coming to the scenario, like the digital banking grew and all the new infra and the tech came into the picture. So how the bank also inculcated all this tech, keeping aside that new fintechs and startups also came in the market from 2010 onwards. We saw Paytm, we saw Razorpay. So many companies are existing from past 10 years now. How did the bank and obviously the cash management, be it like their escrows, be it their nodal accounts, which is got closed now. So how they also inculcated with all these new fintech companies?
So see, initially what happened was the larger cash management bankers, how they do new developments. They would find out either from a customer, from the market, or their own knowledge that was this something new is required. So they would find out, they will prepare a document as we call BRD, for these are my requirements, give it to their technology team. The technology team then hires a vendor, gets it developed. In between, you do all the budgeting, cost, approval, etc. And then the product is delivered. Now, this is what most of the large banks did and do today also to a certain extent. But a lot of the smaller banks, either because they didn't have the people or they didn't have the patience or they couldn't get approval for an upfront cost of 5 crores, 6 crores, 7 crores, the fintechs came to them and said, boss, you're looking for an escrow solution. I have this solution ready. So I can tell you that HDFC and ICICI, in ICICI, we developed this solution. It is running very well. And I mean, we have a large customer base on that. But a lot of the smaller banks may not have this. So what they would do is, they would then look at a fintech, bhai, acha, you have this solution, because what it helps them is, reduces the development time. I don't have to wait for 6 months. I don't need to get cost approval because there is no upfront cost. It's a per transaction cost. So therefore, if I earn, I will pay. If I don't earn, no cost for me. So this model helped a lot of these smaller banks to start getting customers, because now they were equal to all the larger banks. They also have the product. They can go to the client and say, sir, mere paas hai ye, aap mere sath karo. Slowly over the last 4-5 years after COVID, even the larger banks have now started looking at these fintechs as their development team.
Okay.
Because even now at the bank's level also, it is becoming increasingly difficult to get approvals for cost for 5-7 crores, where you don't see immediate cost recovery.
Got it.
So for us, most of the products, 1 year was the max. You recover your costs and then everything is bonus. Today, what's happening is, because the development costs have also gone up and the businesses are not so secured in that sense. There are umpteen number of banks competing with you. So they also think, why should I invest upfront money? Let me tie up with an fintech guy. Product aa jayega, white label karke, we will offer. Tomorrow, if you feel that it has become so big for you, that boss, it's extremely important, you buy out kar lo, ya in-house kar lo, ya develop kar lo, whatever. But at least that initial jo startup risk bolte hai na, wo chala gaya uska. They don't have to worry about spending money on which they will not earn money. So therefore, that's how it has evolved, the entire relationship between banks and fintechs. So as people say today that banks can't survive without fintechs, fintechs can't survive without banks, thoda sa hype hai, but banks can survive without the fintechs. Fintechs can't survive without the banks.
ये पता एक्चुअली बहुत ज़्यादा अगेन बहुत ही कंट्रोवर्शियल स्टेटमेंट है कि फिनटेक के बिना बैंक्स का नहीं है. फिनटेक तो आज है, कल नहीं है. कोई फिनटेक के साथ ऐसा हो सकता है, बट बैंक तो इतने दिनों से है.
No. See, a lot of people have said कि अरे banks are so bloody slow, they don't do this, they don't do that, उनका technology इतना फटा हुआ है. Now today, RBI has put all these rules and regulations on the fintechs also. And now you see how they are squirming under that.
Exactly.
And the banks have to do all of that and then still survive. Plus, fintechs do one software, they do one product, they do one sliver of a business.
Correct.
You know, in every bank they have done it. There are more than 80 to 90 softwares that runs on core banking. So core banking is like most of the banks have Infosys or an Oracle. Okay? So that is your core banking. Now, within cash management itself, you would have a separate software for collection, for payments, for recon. You could have different. For treasury, you may have one for FX, one for this, one for that. Private banking. So there is a huge plethora of software and all of that has to work. And therefore, when people say, "Arey UPI slow ho gaya, wo ho gaya," because you don't realize that it is the banks who are shouldering the entire responsibility of 20 crore transactions that happen. The fintechs are bringing the client, no doubt about it. But boss, they are the ones who are processing those transactions. So I would wait for 10 years for a fintech bank to become even a smallest private sector bank. It's damn tough. It's damn tough. With the compliance on your head, income, cost ratio, assets, liability, it is not an easy business. In fact, banking is one of the most complex businesses for anybody to understand. And therefore, when a person, non-banker, comes into a bank at a middle to senior level, very rarely have they succeeded for this reason. Because you need to be a banker to be able to understand कि ये चीज यहाँ पे कहाँ fail हो सकती है.
Correct.
You could say, हाँ, I am managing it, but then managing तो manager है. He is not doing things here. Because for you to be a leader, you need to be able to take decisions. I mean, one important thing in banking is taking calls. Just I'll give one example. When there was a check clearing, you had to take a call. बॉस ये सिग्नेचर मैच हो रहा है कि नहीं हो रहा है, या ये चेक रिटर्न करना है कि नहीं करना है. इट्स अ कॉल. देयर इज नो साइंटिफिक डेटा ऑन दैट, बट बेस्ड ऑन योर. सेकेंडली, suppose today you have honored a check and suddenly you realize one of your teammates has made a mistake. You know what you could do? Technically, you cannot do anything. That guy is correct in accepting it. But what you do is you go over the counter. You go to him later on and say, अरे सॉरी बॉस, मैंने ना ये गलती से ऑनर कर दिया था, ये प्लीज डिसऑनर कर दे, तू कस्टमर को पैसा मत देना, मैं तेरे को मैसेज भेजता हूँ. They'll accept it. A lot of times it happens that you have to do a transaction, you do it twice by mistake.
Correct. हाँ.
20 लाख की जगह 20 का 2 बार
मेरे
कर
साथ
दिया.
हो चुका है एक बार 28,000 के साथ.
All we have to do is call up the other bank, tell him कि बॉस ये गलती हो गई है, क्लियरिंग हेड को फोन करते हैं,
तो वो लियन मार्क कर देते हैं उसको.
वो सिर्फ लियन मार्क कर देता है. So therefore your money is safe. Now you do your processing. Okay, you send a mail to them, they will get a confirmation from the client, all of that, but your money is safe.
तो अभी क्या होता है जब लियन मार्क हो जाता है, जैसे फॉर एग्जांपल मेरी मम्मी के अकाउंट में ना कुछ पिछले साल लगभग 29,000 रुपीज़ आ गए थे एक्स्ट्रा, तो जिसकी तरफ से आए थे उस बैंक ने उसको लियन मार्क कर दिया. अब वो ऑब्वियसली बैंक टू बैंक में बात करने के बाद वो ट्रांजेक्शन कराने में दैट्स अ प्रोसेस नाउ. तो दैट्स वेयर एक्चुअली आई कैन कॉल एंड स्टॉप दैट मनी, राइट?
No, so what the bank does is, वो सामने वाला बैंक तेरी मम्मी के बैंक को फोन करेगा कि बॉस मैंने गलती से ये क्रेडिट दे दिया है, ये इसको तू लियन मार्क कर दे, तो वो लियन मार्क कर देगा. तो आपकी मम्मी उसको यूज नहीं कर सकती.
वही हो रहा है.
बट नाउ योर बैंक, mummy's bank, has to get a letter from your mummy saying that this is not my money, I am okay to return it. Then they will return that money to the sending bank.
अब यहाँ पर बहुत सारे लोग ऐसा भी कर देते हैं कि सामने वाले लेटर नहीं देते हैं.
हाँ, वो बोलेगा कि बॉस मेरे अकाउंट में पैसा आ गया, मैं नहीं दूंगा. Because see, finally, it's illegal. It's illegal.
It's unethical.
No, unethical nahi. It is illegal. See, unethical, something can be unethical but legal. But this is unethical and illegal.
Okay.
As per RBI guidelines, if you get money by mistake, it is not your money.
Correct.
You have to return it.
Correct. But 90% लोग इंडिया में नहीं करते हैं रिटर्न.
कर देते हैं. They cannot do
अभी
anything.
नहीं कर रहे.
नहीं, वो ब्लॉक हो जाता है ना पैसा. तो वो anyway you can't use it. Your account gets blocked. Not just the money. So if you don't return the money, then the bank has a right to block the account also. See, most of the people return the money knowing Indians है ना कि भैया ये गलत है, मेरा पैसा नहीं है, रिटर्न कर देते हैं. वो तो जो होते हैं शाणे लोग, वो लोग बोलेंगे नहीं बॉस मैं नहीं करूंगा, तो पड़ा रहेगा उसके अकाउंट में, बट वो यूज नहीं कर सकता.
वो यूपीआई वाले तो मैं भी कर देता हूँ. मेरे को भी बहुत बार ऐसा हुआ है कि किसी का पैसा गलती से यूपीआई से आ गया, नंबर का चेंज लास्ट में 1 की जगह 2 लिख दिया, और वो बैंक वाला तो मेरे साथ पहली बार ही हुआ था. लियन वाला चीज़ मुझे आज तक पता नहीं था. ये तो क्या हुआ कि मम्मी के अकाउंट में मेरा नंबर लिंक्ड है, तब किसी का 29,000 आया, तब फिर मतलब मैं गया फिर लेटर लिख दिया.
So what I was saying is that these are nuances of banking.
Correct.
Which a banker would know. Now suppose you take this to your boss and say sir ऐसा ऐसा हुआ है, what is the rule? Rule is sir हम कुछ नहीं कर सकते. हाँ फिर कुछ मत करो. But that's not how banking works.
That's not how.
Because that is how relationship works. Today मेरे से गलती हुई है, कल आपसे गलती होगी. And therefore tomorrow I can't pick up the phone and ask you, na? So this is how banking works. And that is just one thing. All these questions about float, averages, boss, it's damn tough for somebody to come in and understand this is very difficult unless you have spent time in banking and you learned all these things, because then you will not take calls. The problem is that, see, at a senior level it is all about decision making. Now decision making is not black and white all the time कि ये जीत गया ये हार गया. It is always taking a call कि अच्छा इस क्लाइंट को पैसा देना है कि नहीं देना है, अच्छा ये थोड़ा सा खराब है लेकिन ये ठीक है. It is always taking a call. And that call taking comes from experience.
So we have discussed lot about banking, कैसे काम करता है, क्या चीज़ beneficial है banks के लिए. But like there, in all of this above, there's one body called RBI. So उनकी guidelines लोग हमेशा बोलते हैं कि अच्छी नहीं है. ये अचानक से कुछ भी बोल देते, रातों रात हमारा बिजनेस बंद हो जाता है. फिनटेक वाले सबसे ज़्यादा बोलते हैं इस बारे में लेके. So what do you think कि how RBI guidelines are evolving the things? And do they also need to understand many factors before implementing something, और उनको पेस पकड़ना पड़ेगा क्या?
See, what happens is, I mean, to our credit, country's credit, Reserve Bank of India is a very, as you say, benevolent big brother. They don't pass any rules at the outset itself. They will not say, तुम ये कर सकते हो, तुम ये नहीं कर सकते. What they do is, they allow the segment to start, to grow, to see how they are functioning. If they find that your segment is working very well, इज्जत से सब काम कर रहे हैं, कोई shortcut नहीं कर रहा, they are not trying to bend the rules, all of that they will lay their hands off. But if they find that somebody is misusing the lack of rules, somebody is misusing grayness in a rule, then they come down heavily. So I'll just give you one example. For all these years, there were no guidelines for PGs, payment gateways.
Correct.
I mean, खाली एक nodal account का rule था 2002 का, when eBay wanted to start in India. Other than that, there was no guideline for payment gateways. Why? Because everybody was abiding by the rules very diligently. The payment gateways were few and far in between. The banks were doing it very diligently. Everybody was actually keeping a nodal account when you didn't need to. So there was a lot of conservatism. Everything was working very well. So there was no guidelines. RBI came with guidelines only when all these new age PG started coming in, all these betting guidelines came in, when people became very loose with onboarding merchants, they onboarded these Chinese apps, betting apps, all these scam apps. That is when RBI had to come down with licensing for PGs.
Okay.
So it's not as if that RBI doesn't like innovation or RBI is always against innovation. It's just that RBI is like a father who says, चलो गलती करनी है करो कोई बात नहीं, but you start. I will let you work as you want to work. And if they see you are working well, you are not disturbing the existing ecosystem, they won't do much.
But वो ऐसा सिचुएशन आ जाता है बहुत बार कि कोई बिजनेस या पर्टिकुलर चीज बहुत स्केल पे पहुंच गई है, तब जाके उसको
No, but those scales have been reached in a very short period of time. See, that is also the problem. If you see the PG, the Chinese apps scam वगैरह, they all became very big in a 2 to 3 year time frame. Now that's something that they had to come down very heavily. Secondly, there were other agencies also involved because there were money laundering, there was foreign currency involved, so the ED also became involved, and therefore an intra-agency had to be built in. So it's not as if that RBI is late in its responses. RBI is like a benevolent big brother, that it allows you to make mistakes, but not so mistake that you will crash the entire system.
And what would have been gone wrong in that prepaid cards or prepaid instruments बहुत चलते थे बीच में.
Again, same thing. Now see, prepaid cards were started with a particular purpose that they will do this only. But then obviously, because the fintechs couldn't get into banking, the fintechs couldn't do certain things, they manipulated the entire prepaid guidelines into doing something which they were not allowed to do, which is lending. They were not allowed to do. But a lot of these unicorn
I
fintechs
know.
started to do things which were not allowed. And therefore, RBI had to come down really heavily. See, this is what everybody says: RBI protects the banks, and anything that is challenging this monopoly, RBI puts it down. It's not like that. See, you take NBFCs. I mean, fintechs are very small. NBFCs. Now, NBFCs do mostly the same business that banks do: lending. They don't have deposits, but they have assets. So they lend money, banks also lend money. But the guidelines for NBFCs were far, far easier than it was on banks.
Okay.
So just one example: if you give loan to somebody, for banks, they have to keep certain percentage as deposit. For NBFCs, it was far lower. So what it does is it increases the cost for the banks, but it decreases the cost
Also
for
the collateral part also.
So all of these things, RBI was aware that the NBFCs are playing the arbitrage game and they are betting, but it allowed that. And in fact, it told banks that, boss, don't expect that it will be the same. We were there at one meeting. They said, boss, nahi hoga. वो अलग ही रहेगा, तुम अलग ही रहोगे, because you are deposit taking. So I will be harsher on you, but NBFCs. But then when you saw that NBFCs have started tweaking the rules and they are misusing it, so then they bought those guidelines. Now it has put most of the large NBFCs like a Bajaj Finance, Shriram Finance, Tata into same category as banks. So RBI gives you enough chances. If you behave well, it doesn't do anything. But if you don't behave and it think that RBI को तो हम बेवकूफ बना देंगे, हम manipulate कर लेंगे, then they come down, because see, they are the, as you say, उनकी responsibility है कि the entire financial system को safe रखना है.
Correct.
Not कि सबसे ज़्यादा innovation करना है, but safe रखना है, because money is involved. Banking is all about trust and it cannot break that trust. So therefore RBI comes down heavily on them.
Definitely there were like amazing points. But what's your thought on entrepreneurship? Like कि आज के जमाने में हर कोई entrepreneur है. Like मैं तो अगर किसी से पूछूंगा, कोई कॉलेज का बच्चा है जो 18 साल 20 साल का है, उससे अगर पूछोगे क्या बनना चाहते हो, I want to become a founder. This has become very common nowadays. So what's your viewpoint on entrepreneurship as a whole?
No, I am very positive about this change that is happening in our society. Even before my generation, the only career options available to you actually was going into government service. Engineering and medical also wasn't there. If you see my father's time, because they were like esoteric. कैसे करना है कुछ नहीं मालूम. My dad was an engineer, so engineering was one available thing. In our generation, finance became an option. Because we had MBAs, we had finance, but उसमें भी इतना कोई था नहीं. Fortunately, we got into banking by God's grace, not by any choice, and we worked with it, we grew along with that. Today what is happening is people have multiple choices in terms of their career options. I mean, medical and engineering are too old. Law, I mean, I'm saying law. आप देखिए, legal earlier used to be, अरे यार वो तो साला कोर्ट के सामने खड़ा रहेगा काली कोट पहन के, मेरे बच्चे को नहीं बनाना है. But today you see so many people are graduating in law and working in corporate law, which is a phenomenal career. I mean, they do earn well, their lives are sucking, but they are working well. So entrepreneurship is another option, because I don't think there are enough jobs available today where everybody can be satisfied, and entrepreneurship is one such thing which gives you an option to do something that will help you to grow. And as in economics, you have seen the first guy who does any product makes the supernormal profit. The next guy, profit come. Third guy, profit come. So similarly, in the economy, all those things which gave us good amount of money are gone, because competition, there are too many people wanting to be engineers, doctors, lawyers, bankers. So you have to find now careers where, okay, I will make my money, I will earn, but on my own I will earn. So entrepreneurship, I think, is a very good option, especially for people who don't want to be rutted into a job. See, there are people, and I'm not pulling down one against the other. I'm just saying there is another option available for people to go through it, because becoming an entrepreneur, doing things on your own has become easier, relatively easy. I could have never thought in my life कि मैं एक company start करके कुछ धंधा start कर सकता हूँ बिना having crores of rupees.
Correct.
Today I can do all of that, yeah. And that is something which I think is brilliant. That people, and what, 1-2 साल किया, 3 साल किया, नहीं किया, fail हुआ, fine, get into a job if you can get a job. But I think this is a very good trend that's happening.
And also learning.
Learning is amazing in that.
And what about the thing, because you have been into the financial sector in the banks, the people who are starting in finance sector, like any young entrepreneur, a person who is like into 20 to 30 years of age group, when they are starting something into the financial sector, what is one key advice which you will be telling to them?
If you are getting into entrepreneurship in a fintech, I am assuming, one thing you have to remember is that there are people who have 30 years of knowledge and experience than you. You cannot come into that field and say, अरे यार इनको तो कुछ नहीं आता है, मैं बताता हूँ कैसे करते हैं. It doesn't work in finance. See, people may not know, but the way finance industry works is because of certain reason. Trust. People do not trust you with their money that easily. I mean, you see today, everybody, fintech started with a direct model in mutual fund distribution. But today you are realizing that they are not making any money out of it. So what are they doing now? They are getting into those businesses where they can take money from as fees, subscription or whatever, and getting into that. So saying that I will change the industry, change kar lo if your father is Ambani, but not otherwise. You cannot change it.
Thank you so much for being on the podcast. I believe your first podcast was good, and our people, the viewers, will obviously learn from this. Thanks you so much for being here.
Thanks a lot, Rishav. This was my, as we say, maiden podcast, and I'm very happy with the way this has gone.
And I'm really happy that the first podcast of yours was with me.
Thank you very much. I hope the listeners like what I have said. Thank you.
With this, thank you so much, guys. We'll be coming back to the next episode super soon.